We're also now joined by Harsh Pant, who is currently heading the Strategic Studies program at ORF, and we're also joined by Nicholas Crossman, who are joining us from Washington, D.C., who is an international relations professor at the University of Illinois. Harsh Pant, if I can come to you first. Well, we know that Donald Trump, of course, is a tough negotiator when it comes to trade and other issues that matter to America. He's already made several statements saying that he likes Prime Minister Modi, but he's not so sure when it comes to India, that they've treated us unfairly and that we are going to be signing a tremendous deal, but it may not happen in the near future. Your thoughts on what we can expect?
Well, I think trade is certainly something that is not likely to happen in this visit. There was a talk of a limited trade agreement possibly happening, but I think what's likely to happen is the two leaders outlining a broad framework around which the negotiations will proceed in the future. So it's likely that the two leaders will present to their respective bureaucracies and to the people of India and America a principled set of framework where the two negotiators can move forward, where the trade agreement can possibly be resolved over the next few months. But hopefully, I think, as President Trump has himself said, that it's likely to happen after the elections. The final trade agreement that I think a lot of us were expecting is possibly has been pushed forward all the way post elections in America, which I think is a sensible thing to do given the sort of turbulence that the Americans would face over the next few months, given their electoral cycle. So I think likely we are going to see a lot of agreements, a lot of MOUs on issues like intellectual property, on trade facilitation, on defense, but not possibly the larger trade agreement that many were hoping for.
Right, not much on trade as we were expecting initially, and Harsh, your line is slightly weak to us, so hopefully that gets better as we go through the show. But Nicholas Crossman, also to you now, a lot of people are pitching this as an event, high on optics, low on risk, commit to nothing but can talk about everything. As Harsh was talking about, trade maybe not so much, but there are other areas where the two sides have seen conversions when it comes to the Asia-Pacific, whether it's counterterrorism and other issues as well.
Part of it is for domestic politics, no question. When Prime Minister Modi visited the United States back in September in 2019, there was a large rally in the city of Houston in Texas for him, and Donald Trump is looking forward to a large rally in India. In this case, both leaders, both are nationalists, both seem to want to both advance their national interests and also partner with each other, and are using this opportunity to get a bunch of images that will play well with their domestic audiences, showing them that they can work together. But trade deals in particular are unlikely. There are perhaps, though, some opportunity for some additional sales in defense. As for the United States, it's important to try to get India to be more interested in American weapons as opposed to Russian weapons.
Right. And now, Harsh, of course, there have been fears of protectionism. There have been senior U.S. officials have spoken about that before this visit, saying that there are fears that Make in India programs announced by the government are pushing protectionism when it comes to India. But we can make the argument that Make in America has the same pitch. So this fear of protectionism runs both ways. And how can we counter that?
Well, I think the best way of countering that perhaps is to recognize that both the leaders have very similar ideas about trade and about how to develop their own manufacturing base. So perhaps at the leadership level, it won't be that much of a challenge. It would be at the bureaucratic level that you operationalize their visions into something where the two sides can work together. That's a challenge. As you point out, making America great again and making India have very similar underpinnings. So clearly that's a broader convergence that we share with each other. But I think the larger point here is what to do about the sort of tariffs that both sides have increased on each other's products, and what to do about the GSP framework that America had withdrawn. And clearly India was expecting something along those lines, and America was expecting something similar happening on the tariffs. And that's not likely to happen, given that the two sides have not managed to contain their divergences. But I think that the larger aspect of this visit would be, as many people have pointed out, that this visit would be high on optics. but I think optics itself tells you a story about Indo-US relationship that has now been broadened to a level where people-to-people ties are animating this. And as the previous commentator pointed out, the Houston rally was a big marker in the way the Indian Americans became a major factor in terms of influencing the course of this relationship. And when Mr. Trump visits Ahmedabad today, he would find a similar sentiment being expressed by several thousand Indians who would be a lakh Indians
right.
would be present there during his visit and during the stadium event.
Right. Right. And Nicholas, I know you had thoughts on the fears of protectionism and what both sides actually think about their own programs of Make in India and Make in America.
Well, in the United States, because of the election coming up in November, it would be surprising to see some sort of breakthrough on outstanding trade issues at this point. But nevertheless, the President, Donald Trump, has a strong incentive to show that he is making progress, that tell voters, he's playing hardball. He is using protectionism to try to get a better deal, and if he can sell that pitch, then that could help his reelection efforts. But if he squanders it, perhaps if he, say, would gamble too much or try to ask for something from Modi that Modi does not want to deliver, then that would hurt his perception back home. And so likely there's advantage in the optics of showing that these two leaders of the world's largest democracies can work together, including, for example, on issues relating to China, on health issues, coronavirus, and others. But with a trade deal, because of the upcoming election in the United States, probably some sort of breakthrough is unlikely.
Right. We believe that Donald Trump has, of course, tweeted once again, both in Hindi and English, as he touches down here in about an hour. That's his tweet there on your screens. He has tweeted in Hindi. So basically saying that we are going to be arriving in India and that we're keen to be in India soon, and we're on our way. And in some few hours from now we will be meeting everyone here in India. So that, of course, is Donald Trump tweeting in Hindi. He's later on tweeted the same thing in English as well. So as you can see, a lot of engagement on social media by both these leaders when it comes to the US President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi. They've been engaging with each other online a lot just before this visit. And Harsh, that really is significant in the sense that both these leaders are seen as strongmen, as potentially reaching out to their audiences through social media and other avenues, a little not very keen on the traditional forms of media as well. So in that, I feel that Donald Trump sees similarities between himself and Prime Minister Modi.
Yes, and I think he has made it very clear that even with the differences on trade, he likes Mr. Modi. And clearly the fact that the two leaders have been meeting so regularly has helped. And if you compare his treatment of Mr. Modi to the way he has treated some of the other world leaders, it's quite interesting. I think the camaraderie, there's a sense of a relationship that they have developed over the last few years is very significant. And I think given the challenges that India has faced over the last few years under his presidency, it's also remarkable how smooth the transition has been, that we have not had major bumps. At one point, it had seemed as if the Iranian sanctions would be the deal breaker. It had seemed as if S-400 deal that India was signing with the Russians would be a deal breaker. But somehow we have managed to get over those bumps along the road in a way that has not jeopardized the larger trajectory of this relationship. And I think that is remarkable in a Trump presidency, which has been very, very disruptive, even if you look at some of America's closest allies. So I think as Mr. Trump comes to India, one can only hope that perhaps that those conversations that the two prime ministers, that the two leaders have had in the past few months will be taken forward, and perhaps the two leaders can come to an agreed set of principles on which even some of the most contentious issues on trade can be resolved moving forward.
Okay, so Harsh, we're just going to dial you back and get a better audio on you as well as I go to Nicholas Grossman. Nicholas, now, as we were pointing out, let's talk a little bit more about other deals that are possible. I know that the Americans are keen on more engagement when it comes to the energy sector. Are you hopeful to see more coming out of this visit when it comes to energy and defense?
I think that part there's reason for optimism that defense in particular, one thing that the Trump administration has approached this in a way that is differently from previous administrations is emphasizing selling U.S. products and trying to get India and some other countries as well to buy U.S. defense products without necessarily requiring India to drop any deals with the Russians, including the air defense systems that the previous speaker mentioned. So that is an opportunity for sales there. There's also potential different cooperation for health issues, where I know that the United States is looking for something that will draw the two countries closer in energy, where the United States, starting in the early 2000s, had opened up trade in things, in particular nuclear energy with India, created opportunities that drew the countries closer and also created somewhat of a hedge compared to Iran, where the United States and other countries have been trying to pressure the Iranians to abandon its nuclear program. And so the contrast of India following the nuclear rules and working internationally, that's an opportunity for the U.S. Signal that partnership to the world.
Right, absolutely. And of course, other issues we are expecting, hopefully, and Harsh Pant is also back with us now. And Harsh, we were talking about how we can possibly expand this relationship when it comes to the energy sector and, of course, defense. These are two areas that Americans are very keen on expanding, given the fact that our energy needs continue to grow and Iran's forced to have sanctions on it. But also, of course, do you see a larger free trade agreement being signed at some point, given the fact that these negotiations can go on back and forth in the next couple of months?
Well, I'm quite, skeptical that a larger free trade agreement might be in the offing in the immediate future. I think what's likely to happen is that we will have a limited trade deal to starve off some of the challenges that the two sides are facing, and then start the conversation again after American elections, because that's politically sensible thing to do, given the circumstances that we are facing between the two sides. But I think the larger reality of this relationship is that trade has been a big problem, both, if you recall, under Mr. Obama, also it was a big problem. Under Mr. Trump, it remains a bigger problem because Mr. Trump has clearly had differences with India public. So I think as we move forward, perhaps the sensible thing might be to look at a limited set of issues that can be tackled in the short to medium term, and then take on the larger issue of FTA over the long term, which is going to be a very, very contentious negotiations in any case.
Right. And contentious issues, when you talk about this, also, of course, believe that the senior U.S. representatives and officials just ahead of this visit said that they will be talking about religious freedoms. They are going to be bringing up protectionism. They're going to be talking about freedom and democracy. And these are issues that President Trump may be bringing up as well in his dialogue with Prime Minister Modi. Is there any sort of wariness here in India about those issues being brought up, do you feel?
I think, yes, the officials would be wary of Mr. Trump raising them. I think in particular in public. Yeah. I think public airing of differences might not be one of the deliverables that perhaps they would be looking for. But I think that's unlikely to happen. But again, with Mr. Trump, you never know, and I think that's the challenge. How do you manage Mr. Trump during these 2 days? How do you manage his media interactions? How do you manage his interactions with the Prime Minister on public platforms? And private, I think both sides would be airing their grievances, which as they should be, and I think the Indian side would be quite confident of answering most of these queries. But I think largely it would be how do you articulate those differences publicly in a manner that does not give a sense of growing rift between the two sides, which in any case I don't think is something that is likely to happen. Okay,
Nicholas Grossman, I'll give you the last word there. Your expectations from this visit, and who do you feel will benefit more from this? We know that Donald Trump is going into an election year. He loves big crowds, and of course the Indian diaspora being very important in America as well.
I think that both leaders will benefit quite a bit, showing that they have the partnership between the two. I also think it's unlikely that Trump will push Modi much on, say, human rights questions or questions in Gujarat or others related to those potential issues compared to past presidents. He's been more focused on issues of sovereignty and also of trying to boost his own image at home. So he wants to have a pleasant visit, and my guess is he won't challenge the prime minister on issues where they disagree all that much.